Fighting words over a new home for the San Diego Chargers, the city leaders who can't agree on Measure C.
The only way to remove an elected official was resignation, death, or a recall, which could take a long time.
A blast from San Diego's political past. Voters decide on how to get rid of an elected leader after a high-profile sex scandal.
And this is the worst part, I think. There's no window. A friend of mine can't put this in because it gets cold at night.
San Diego apartments riddled with illegal code violations. What's happening now with the tenants? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The battle over San Diego's Measure C heats up today. Opponents blasted the stadium proposal plan while Mayor Kevin Faulconer says he's now backing the proposal. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
Measure C opponents wasted little time striking back after San Diego's mayor came out in support of the project. An afternoon news conference in the city's iconic downtown library was filled to capacity with opponents and supporters. Architect Rob Quigley says the structure will blot out the city's skyline as people drive up from the south, and he says it's particularly noticeable from an interstate off-ramp. Quigley says that altered skyline will affect the desirability and livability of the East Village.
The Welcome to San Diego view that took 35 years to create, and this is a convadium if it's only 220 feet tall, not the 400-foot allowable. This is devastating.
City Councilman David Alvarez represents the neighborhood where the stadium complex would be built. He says there was no public input when the measure was crafted, and it shows.
In crafting Measure C, Spanos did not involve the public. So it's not surprise that if you actually read the text in Measure C, you see giveaway after giveaway after giveaway to Spanos.
San Diego's mayor says some of those concerns have been addressed. Kevin Faulconer endorsed the Chargers Stadium Convention Center project after meeting several times with team officials. He wouldn't support Measure C until the team agreed to more safeguards.
It took a while, and that's okay, but I wasn't budging.
Faulconer says he's pleased with the outcome. He produced a letter signed by Chargers owner Dean Spanos. The letter thanks the mayor for his hard work on the issue and agrees to adopt 8 additional safeguards. They include a longer agreement by the team to stay in town, a commitment to replacing lost parking, and no subsidies from the city's general fund. Faulconer says he also addressed the East Village's quality of life.
As you look at Petco Park, how that was really integrated into downtown, that worked. We have the opportunity to ensure that we have quality of life issues from traffic, parking, and particularly view corridors have to be addressed.
Faulconer says the Chargers also promised the city could keep revenue from non-football events, cap the project's cost, and keep tourism marketing funding at 2% instead of 1% as called for in the measure. Faulconer says those agreements are important, but he says the measure still needs voter approval.
Getting 2/3 is very, very difficult in any election, and I think everybody knows that. What was important to me is that we get these safeguards. We get these commitments up front, not just for Measure C, but setting the table for the future.
San Diego City Council member Chris Cate says Measure C is still Measure C. He says any side deals negotiated between the mayor and the Chargers are not binding.
So any type of agreement that that the mayor has developed with Spanos that supersedes the language in the measure is just not accurate, because the voters will have the say on the measure. That is what's legally binding at the end of the day, is whatever is specifically in that measure. Neither the mayor nor Mr. Spanos or us as council members can override a vote of the people.
Ultimately, it is the voters who will decide what happens to Measure C and what happens to this portion of land in downtown San Diego next to the library. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Voters in November will have a chance to weigh in on plastic bags. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy was there this morning as supporters of Proposition 67 stopped by the San Diego City Hall.
Environmental leaders and San Diego City Council President Sherry Leitner are urging support for Proposition 67, a measure to uphold California's ban on single-use plastic bags. They gathered on the Civic Concourse. Their background, a giant inflatable sea turtle.
To a sea turtle, a plastic bag looks like a jellyfish, which is dinner. They ingest them, and then they end up starving to death because they can't eat their real food.
San Diego has already approved a plastic bag ban. That was passed by the City Council in July and set to take effect next year. Council President Leitner says San Diego's ban will continue, regardless of the state outcome on Election Day.
Although it's not supposed to go into effect until April of next year, when this is, when everyone votes yes on 67, this will go into effect immediately.
150 other cities and counties across the state have also outlawed the bags. Prop 67 is intended to help reduce the estimated 192 million single-use plastic bags that are distributed in California every week. Governor Jerry Brown signed a law prohibiting plastic bags 2 years ago, but soon after, the plastic bag industry launched a petition drive and collected enough signatures to place the ban on the ballot. Opponents of the measure say the ban would jeopardize thousands of bag manufacturing jobs. They also argue grocery store chains would make a big profit on bag sales. Under the statewide ban, grocery and convenience stores could no longer offer the plastic bags. They would be required to charge at least 10 cents for a paper or reusable bag. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
As San Diego voters decide who will get their vote next month, Ballot Measure E asks them to decide how to remove someone from office. KPBS investigative reporter Amita Sharma says the scandal from the past prompted the measure.
A big hole in San Diego City Charter surfaced in 2013. Sexual harassment accusations had started piling up against former Mayor Bob Filner. City Attorney Jan Goldsmith says officials sought to bar Filner from working alone with women. But the move wasn't sustainable. The mayor had to go. Yet city rules offered no quick fix or even a process for an exit.
The only way to remove an elected official was resignation, death, or a recall, which could take a long time.
Goldsmith says next month's ballot measure creates a quicker procedure for removal. Civil or criminal charges would have to be filed against the official first. Then, 7 of the 9 city council members would have to agree to put the official's ouster to a public vote. Goldsmith concedes the process may be vulnerable to mischief.
That's the biggest risk you have with this, is that you make it too easy to remove somebody and all of a sudden it's political. We have to watch this carefully if this passes.
Still, Goldsmith says a process is better than none at all. No argument against Measure E was filed in the office of the city clerk. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
A federal judge has rejected a motion to dismiss Planned Parenthood's lawsuit against an anti-abortion rights group. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says it's connected to a series of videos that claim to show Planned Parenthood officials linked to the sale of fetal tissue.
California's 7 Planned Parenthood affiliates filed the lawsuit against the group. The suit argues that the people who made the videos were involved in racketeering and other illegal activities. Planned Parenthood says the videos were heavily edited and that the filmed officials did nothing wrong. Tracy Skadden is general counsel for the Planned Parenthood affiliate in San Diego. She says the anti-abortion activists need to be held responsible.
The point of the lawsuit was to expose the falsity and illegality of the methods that they used and the ongoing harm to Planned Parenthood from the video smear campaign.
Planned Parenthood says its clinics received a big increase in security threats after the videos were released. The trial date for the lawsuit is December 2017. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Tensions are high in parts of Los Angeles. This after 2 weekend fatal police shootings. Sunday, a crowd gathered in South LA to protest the killing of an 18-year-old. Police say he was carrying a handgun. A few miles away, there was another deadly police shooting. According to LAPD, police shot and killed a man who pointed a gun at officers. The gun, however, was reportedly a replica. Police arrested 3 protesters. Closer to home, El Cajon police made a number of arrests this weekend. A dozen protesters are facing charges for refusing to leave the site of last week's fatal police shooting. An officer shot and killed Alfred Alongo. His family says he was experiencing emotional distress at the time. San Diego County has 41 psychiatric emergency response teams to deal with these types of calls. Earlier today, I spoke with Director Mark Marvin about why a team wasn't dispatched and whether one could have made a difference in a Longo's case.
A PERT team consists of a licensed mental health professional as well as either a law enforcement officer or sheriff deputy. They ride together on their shift. And basically, when a call comes in to dispatch a 911 emergency call where it appears a psychiatric issue is at play, then the dispatcher will dispatch the PERT unit to go to that scene to intervene.
And why might a PERT unit be better suited than, say, an officer?
Well, typically these psychiatric calls involve potential dangerousness to oneself. For instance, a person might be considering suicide. It could involve dangerousness to someone else. Or maybe the person is reported to be gravely disabled where they are having extreme difficulty taking care of daily functioning needs.
And so when you say a danger to oneself or to someone else, typically when someone's a danger to someone else, wouldn't that be something for police? When would it become something that PERT would need to get involved with?
Well, let's say that if an officer goes out there who just happened to be patrolling down the street and that officer was the closest officer to that scene. He might go and assess the situation, talk to that individual. If there are family members around, certainly talk to them. And then he would probably ask for a PERT unit to assist. Not in all cases, but if he thought this is pretty intense and since we have that resource, I think I'll request that resource to come in. The advantage that we have as a PERT team, while en route to that call, our PERT clinician can actually look up through the county's electronic health record any information if that person is in fact in the mental health system. That could be diagnosis, medications, current providers, case managers, and we can actually start to contact those people to get information. And sometimes it might even include family members as well. That gives us a little bit of a head start. But then once we arrive at the scene, it's essential that officer safety, the consumer of mental health services, or that person in crisis, their safety, the public safety is taken care of and assured first before the PERT clinician actually then goes into the scene and actually starts to converse with that person.
Just recently in El Cajon, there was a case where there was someone who the family thought was not acting like himself. His mother later said he was possibly having like a psychotic moment because of the loss of a friend. And in this case, the El Cajon authority said, PERT team was not available. When something like this happens where a PERT team isn't available and it does result in a fatality, when you're reviewing your procedures and policies, what are your thoughts?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a very interesting question and has many facets, actually. I can't comment specifically about the El Cajon case. In fact, it's true, a PERT unit was available through El Cajon, but was on another call. Sometimes there are PERT teams available, but they're unable to respond because of the nature of the safety concerns at that time. But if an officer determines and requests a PERT unit, and let's say there's not one available out of his or her jurisdiction, the dispatcher can actually request one from a neighboring jurisdiction.
San Diego residents can expect cooler temperatures before it warms back up this week. Heather Waldman has more details in tonight's forecast.
A vigorous little storm system came barreling into the west coast this afternoon. That spread some showers across the Bay Area into the Central Valleys, even a little bit of mountain snow into the highest peaks of the Sierra. That rain will stay off to the north of Los Angeles and San Diego, but that same little trough of low pressure brought in some cooler air for the start of the week. Temperatures at night will still be very pleasant. Mid-60s expected in the metro area with, again, just a few clouds. Your temperatures across the rest of San Diego County will be chillier into the mountains for sure. 36 in Mount Laguna, 47 degrees in Alpine, and around 45 for you in Ramona, 59 in Mecca. Generally, the coast will stay in the 60s. Oceanside may drop into the middle 50s. Not quite as much of a marine layer tonight as compared to more recent nights. That cooler air will continue to spread eastward, so much of the area will see temperatures about 5 to 10 degrees below the average Tuesday afternoon. Some clouds at the coast to start, and then more sunshine for most places. You go inland, bright and sunny across the deserts. Should be a very nice day in the mountains after a couple of chilly starts. Later on this week, though, the warmer air will be back. We're talking Thursday into Friday. Temperatures back well above the average as that cooler air now shifts into the north central U.S. So here's a look at those 5-day forecasts. We'll start you off at the coast. Again, there could be some clouds the next couple of mornings, but the marine layer shouldn't be too dense. More sunshine during the afternoons. Highs will be in the mid-70s through Wednesday, and then notice the temperatures start to creep up Friday into Saturday. We're back into the 80s. You go just a little bit inland, temperatures will be in the mid-80s Thursday, even 90s by Friday, so a very warm land breeze setting up there. But notice your nighttime temperatures will be in the lower to middle 50s. So despite some toasty afternoons, some very nice nights coming up. Into the mountains, temperatures on the cooler side to start the week. Looking at mid to upper 60s Tuesday and Wednesday. Back into the 70s though. Friday into Saturday, both days will be filled with sunshine, although Friday afternoon and into Saturday we are expecting the breezes to kick up just a little bit. Temperatures have been a little bit on the cooler side into the deserts as well, if you can call upper 80s cool. When you think about the fact that we should be in the 90s, definitely below normal. 88 your high on Tuesday, but here come the 90s again on Wednesday, and we'll climb up into the middle 90s Friday and into the day on Saturday. But again, notice your nighttime lows. They'll be in the low to mid 50s over the next couple of evenings, so certainly some days to dress in layers. Heather Waldman for KPBS News.
Since taking office, President Obama has deported more than 2.5 million people in the country illegally, more than any previous president. As part of our News and Numbers series, iNewsSource reporter Chris Young says federal data shows how the administration's handling of deportations has played out in San Diego County.
The number of immigrants detained and deported after being processed through San Diego County jails has dropped significantly over Obama's 2 terms as president. That's according to data obtained by iNewsSource through the Freedom of Information Act. In fiscal year 2010, immigration officials deported nearly 1,800 local inmates. Those numbers have since declined almost every year. Last year, the agency deported only about 200. Immigration experts say there's an explanation for the drop in deportations.
The data clearly reflect a change in the effort to focus more of Homeland Security's resources on the real bad guys.
The real bad guys, according to the Obama administration, are violent criminals who threaten national security or public safety. Immigration authorities officially started prioritizing their enforcement efforts in 2011, but that policy could change when a new president takes office next year. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Chris Young.
Following up on a KPBS and Voice of San Diego investigation, it uncovered stacks of complaints about gas leaks, sewage backups, and other problems linked to one San Diego County landlord, Benkim Shah. KPBS reporter Megan Burks looked into what happened to his former tenants and found a story about San Diego's housing crisis.
9 months after Benkim Shah sold his property in Barrio Logan, the building's new owners threw a party. The leaks and mold, the relentless cockroach infestations, and the fed-up tenants were gone. In their place, brand new pipes, fresh drywall, and on this night, a DJ and beer. A young crowd of potential tenants filled the halls of 2605 Logan Avenue. They poked around apartments turned pop-up galleries featuring neighborhood artists. New owners LWP Group put on the event. It also owns the Pearl Hotel in Point Loma. But one door remained locked during all of this. On the other side, Sherry Godat and her cat waited the party out. Godat is one of several tenants who invited me into their homes to share evidence of dangerous and illegal housing conditions for my investigation into Shah. Godat did not want to be interviewed for this story, but here she is in 2014.
This is the worst part, I think. There's no window. A friend of mine can't put this in because it gets cold at nights.
Shah later swapped out the plywood her friend installed for a working window. A legal settlement has allowed Godat to stay in the building through December. But all of her old neighbors are gone.
In the last year, I've seen a number of buildings that were sold.
Attorney Dan Lickel represented some of Shah's tenants before and after the sale of the building. He says he's seeing more and more tenants displaced as developers buy property in cheaper neighborhoods like Barrio Logan and City Heights.
The new owner came in and decided they wanted to renovate, and as a practical matter, tenants were asked to leave. Tenants who had been in these places for, in some cases, 20 years.
Tenants from 2605 Logan were invited back to the building after the 6-month renovation, but many couldn't afford it. Lickle says, like many others, they ended up on couches or in other dilapidated buildings. With rents going up countywide and other factors like jobs and transportation, it wasn't as simple as just moving to a more affordable area. Greg Strangman heads LWP Group, the building's new owner, and says he sympathizes.
Each building has its own situation. Like sometimes we renovate buildings unit by unit as they become vacant. Then we're renovating those just because the building is in, let's just call it, better shape than others. This building ended up being an example of just code compliance violations and just uninhabitable things.
Strangman says the water leaks, mold, and vermin were so bad it didn't make sense to keep tenants around during the renovation. When the work was done, the units went back on the market for $900 to $1,200, and that's in line with the average rent for Barrio Logan.
In today's time, when the average rent in San Diego County is over $1,700, we're still very much workforce housing.
But some of the previous tenants were paying as little as $650 a month. Stephen Russell heads the San Diego Housing Federation and says it's those very low-income renters who are seeing the worst of San Diego's housing crisis.
The rental market is like a game of musical chairs, and the person who has the most money gets to sit down first. That's a very simplified notion, but it's easy to see where those with the least money are ultimately bid out of the market. There simply is not enough supply in the city right now.
Russell says that when home building slows, more well-off renters are willing to move into previously undesirable units.
If there's a healthy pipeline of housing in a community, then there would always be housing that is aging out or filtering down to affordability. Unfortunately, in San Diego, because we've had such constraints on housing production, we don't have that pipeline of continuously aging housing. And so in a market like what we're seeing right now, where vacancy rates are extremely low, there's an opportunity for landlords now to take these properties and fix them up. That's where the role of subsidized affordable housing comes in.
San Diego's housing crisis is often told as a story about numbers. Add more units, bring down demand, and rental prices will follow. But the ugly side of the story is this. For years, poor tenants have turned to dangerous housing like Shaw's to afford a roof over their head. And now, even that's disappearing. Sherry Godat, the woman in the corner unit who didn't join the party, said in a text message she expects to be homeless when her lease ends in December. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Okay, Megan, so we just saw how after living under these conditions with code violations, now a number of these people are displaced. What protections, if any, are there for people in the San Diego County area to prevent them from being suddenly evicted?
So in 2004, the city passed something called the Tenants' Right to Know Ordinance. And what it does is it says if you're a landlord and you want to evict a tenant, you have to tell them why. And then it says that there are only certain reasons that are valid reasons. So obvious things like not paying your rent. But there's also a scenario where the landlord can evict a tenant if they need to make repairs. And tenants' rights attorneys have interpreted that to mean that the repair has to be needed. That's the key word there, needed.
So, Megan, you went directly to the source. You spoke to the author of this ordinance, and what did she tell you?
Yeah, so former Councilwoman Donna Fry wrote the ordinance, and she says that if a landlord wants to go in and just put in shiny new countertops, they can technically evict the tenant for that. Should they evict the tenant? Probably not, she says, but technically they can. And that's how how the ordinance was originally drafted. Now, the final version that's actually on the books refers to needed repairs, and it says that the tenant should only be removed if it's reasonably necessary. And so that's where Donna Fry and tenants' rights attorneys disagree. We asked the city attorney's office to sort of play referee, and they said that only the courts, only judges and attorneys can really make meaning of this ordinance, and so far it hasn't been tested in court.
So it hasn't been tested in courts, but there has to be some rights that renters have. What are the basic rights of renters here in San Diego County?
In San Diego, in the city of San Diego, we have the right to know ordinance. So if they're a long-term tenant, they need a reason. But just generally, people get either 30 days or 60 days notice, depending on how long they've been in the unit.
Most of us are familiar with the ongoing problem of affordable housing in the area. Some people would even classify it as a crisis. These renters were already living in these poor conditions, partially because of their tight fixed incomes. So what happens to them now?
It really varies. Some were able to find units in some of the few kind of dilapidated buildings that are left. I do know of one tenant who was able to get into subsidized affordable housing. I know of a tenant who landed on a couch. And as you heard in the story, at least one tenant expects to be homeless.
Wow. Thank you so much for your work.
Thanks.
The running mates of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will be in the spotlight tomorrow night. It's the first and only debate between vice presidential candidates Mike Pence and Tim Kaine. It'll be a chance for each of them to make their mark, but the pressure is on because unlike their practiced presidential counterparts, they haven't been debating all campaign season.
What they want to avoid is a significant gaffe that diminishes their effectiveness and makes them a liability for their ticket.
Tomorrow's debate will take place in Virginia. You can watch the debate tomorrow night live on the PBS NewsHour. Special coverage starts at 6 o'clock right here on KPBS. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.